Okay, with that said, let's cover a couple of other topics. So first of all, let's talk about NFTs. What you guys know about NFTs?
So what I know about it is that it's basically it's basically a decentralized way of signaling ownership to a piece of art which is digital, right? Roughly.
Yeah, what's your take on that?
Expensive JPEGs.
Expensive JPEGs.
Expensive JPEGs.
Expensive JPEGs.
But yeah, I think Jonas got it. It's like a digital ownership of a digital asset.
Yeah.
Ownership of a digital asset.
Yeah. That's basically right. I mean, expensive JPEGs is basically the main use case, right? You can buy very expensive JPEGs. Although right now it's a bit of a bear market, right? The NFTs have gone through many cycles in the very short time that they've been around. This is already like the third bear market or something. So right now the JPEGs are a bit less expensive than usual. But yeah, that's basically what you can do. You can go to OpenSea. That would be the main hub of activity right now for NFTs. And you can buy JPEGs. Mm-hmm. Very, very, like literally very expensively. Okay. A bit, and that's in part because it's on Ethereum. So, you're going to pay like $100+ in fees anyway. And the JPEG itself is usually going to cost in the thousands, right? And people have been speculating a lot on JPEGs.
Pixelated little silly JPEGs.
It's wonderful. And of course, and this is one of those things, right? It's one of those things where the majority of the world is just completely baffled. It's like, why would you spend millions of dollars on a JPEG, and I can just right click save it, and then I own it too.
That was I couldn't get my head around that for a while.
Yeah, it is really weird. But I do think that the first thing I love about NFTs is that it gives artists an opportunity to get paid. Mm-hmm. I generally think that's a good thing. I generally think there's not enough of artists getting paid in the world. So I generally think that's a good thing.
The one thing that when I'm like as an artist or like let's just say, take me as an example as a filmmaker, like I'm looking at NFTs and I'm thinking, well, like two things: what rights am I giving away, and why would anybody be interested in buying that? So because obviously if I'm making something that is expensive to produce and I want to sell it, then the question is that NFT potential, is that like on top? Is that am I giving the rights away to the degree that I cannot sell it to distributor? And like how is this working?
Okay, yeah, and that's so we haven't seen NFTs for movies as far as I know. And I think there's a huge barrier there because it's so expensive and complicated to produce, right?
Yeah.
But in general, in the NFT space, you have seen kind of two directions that this goes in. One of them is the NFT with the JPEG with a roadmap, and the other is just a JPEG. And so the JPEG with a roadmap is where it's like, okay, you buy this, whatever, this gorilla picture, this randomly generated gorilla avatar or whatever, and it comes with a bunch of other stuff. So and the gorilla example is a real example, right? You can buy cyber Kongs, which are pixelated gorilla avatars, and when you I don't actually know the exact mechanics. It's very intricate, but I think when you own a cyber Kong, or perhaps you have to like stake it, stake the cyber Kong, and you get bananas, which is a different token. Right, so you get the banana token. I don't know what it is. You get 10 bananas a day or something like that, and you can use bananas with maybe something else to like breed the cyber Kongs and make cyber Kong babies or something. I don't know. It's complicated. All right. But anyway, and often there will be NFTs with roadmaps. Something that became very popular is that an item on the roadmap is like, we'll make a video game, right? It's like you buy this avatar and eventually you'll be able to use this avatar in a video game. Never mind that it's a bit complicated to make a video game. So anyway, according to various roadmaps, we should be expecting about 17,000 NFT based video games next year. So let's see how that goes.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
in general, I think a much better bet is the NFT with the JPEG without a roadmap. What you're buying is ownership of the JPEG. That's it. You're buying ownership of this. And bragging rights. That's a big one, right? It's basically, I think that the most relatable analog to this is buying a print of a photograph, right? Because of course, if you say, okay, I buy a painting, there's only one of that painting. There's only one original.
Yeah.
Which is like the paint strokes that the painter put on with their paintbrush. With a photograph, it's a little different because you have a negative and you can make as many prints as you want.
Mm-hmm.
But what photographers, like photographer artists, will do is that they will have a limited run of prints. And so either maybe there's only one, right? There's one giant print of this photograph and you either own it or you don't. Or there's maybe a run of 100 or something like that and you own one of those. It could also be, the signed.
I was going to say that's one of the things that the limited artwork is always, that it had some kind of direct relation to the artist often.
Yeah. So it could be the signed print that you get. And it's more like that. And even though this is kind of difficult to wrap one's head around, it does make sense that there has to be something like that. There has to be a digital form of something like that. Think about all the money that is being spent on status symbols, on bragging rights, right? The Supreme handbag and the Air Jordans. Are those still cool? Does this still exist? I don't know. But anyway, expensive sneakers, right? Expensive things that one of the most important features of a status symbol is that it is clear to other people that this is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And for some status symbols, it's important that it only signals to insiders. Right? So you might wear a watch that is clearly very expensive. So anyone who sees it can tell you dropped like $100,000 on this watch. But you might also wear a watch where only the insiders realize that this, modest looking watch is actually a priceless artifact. But it has to signal. If it doesn't do that, if it doesn't signal that to anyone, what's the point, right? Yeah. It has to do the signaling. And so NFTs, this kind of like the expensive JPEG NFT, is that digitized.
Exactly, yeah.
So when people see that you have a CryptoPunk Twitter profile image and they can go check if you actually own it essentially, right? Then they know that your profile picture on Twitter is worth, I don't know what it is now, but basically millions probably, or at least hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And that's the point. The right people know what this means about your status and about your net worth, right?
I might be jumping ahead into another topic you may be wanting to talk about, but I think this will become more and more relevant and important as we step into more metaverses.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's
where it really applies.
Yeah, that's where you. So if we think about a metaverse, right? So essentially, a metaverse is like the non-physical verse that we interact in, and right now the metaverse is like Slack and Twitter and email and all this other stuff that we use, and video games, right? And it makes sense that that even happens now. You can go into Fortnite and people will run around with expensive skins, right? So their player character has a certain look, and in order to get this skin, you either had to spend a lot of money or you had to win some tournament or God knows what, right? So there's status associated with that skin. And one of the ideas of these NFTs is that you essentially have a transferable status symbol, where maybe we're hanging out in some form of the metaverse, right? And the future vision of that usually involves like VR goggles, right? Like Ready Player One style. We're hanging out in the metaverse. And you come in there with the equivalent of an expensive suit. And it's quite important. It doesn't work if anyone can just download that suit, right? There has to be something that says this is the real thing. This is the authentic thing. And it has to be expensive because otherwise it doesn't work. And so NFTs open the doorway to having that, to having the expensive suit in the metaverse. And I think even that itself is basically enough utility, actually. You should be excited about this. People want to flex, okay?
I think if we're getting into a metaverse, more like the stuff that was announced by Zaki, or maybe we'll get something from somebody else, which is a little bit like less.
Yeah.
Well, like a sucker worse.
Yeah.
I think that's really the point where there's a potential to basically implement that, because inside the thing you can probably quite easily basically limit this particular piece of thing, whatever it is, in whatever sort of like. I would imagine that there could easily be something like a frame, like an image frame or something, in which only NFTs like live, right? And it's like part of the verse, basically, to know that once something is in this, or basically in the original frame, that right, like this is
the real thing.
This is the real thing, and then immediately once you have like what's the equivalent of a home base or something, right? In 3D, people will immediately walk in and
you want to deck it out with expensive stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it will become more apparent to more people that like, oh, this is really like.
And by the way, it doesn't only have to be expensive stuff flexing, right? But just like you walk into someone's apartment and they have furnished their apartment, and it tells you, like, we communicate with how we dress and how we furnish our place. And even if it's all IKEA furniture, it can still be like tastefully done or not. And there's going to be a difference between visiting someone in their metaverse home base and them having, maybe they have expensive art on the walls and whatnot, but maybe they just have really nice touches. That doesn't even have to be expensive, but it's like the real thing where an artist got paid for this, rather than just I downloaded it somewhere, And that, again, that even if it's, look, if I have a $5 mug in the metaverse, where I've basically supported an artist who made this and it's the real thing, that says something about me that you don't get if I just have the free mug asset, right? So there, I think it doesn't only have to be like the super expensive stuff. But here we will have to link to this Twitter thread. There's a Twitter account called, I think it's Punk6529. So that's the CryptoPunk with that number, right? And 6529 is kind of an NFT philosopher who's really good. And his thesis is essentially that NFTs will save the future. And here's why. Because what you mentioned, right? Mark Zuckerberg is like, oh, we're Meta now. We're called Meta now. We'll build the metaverse. And basically everybody knows that if Zuckerberg is successful in building the 3D space, the virtual space that we interact with and interact in and work in and so on in the future, it's going to be a dystopian nightmare, right? Just like Facebook is a dystopian nightmare, and it's obvious to anyone who has paid any attention in the last 5 years, the Zuckerverse will be a dystopian disaster for humanity if it wins, right? And so how do we solve this problem? Because Facebook has all the money. So how do we, normal people, solve this problem? Well, one way to do it is NFTs. Because why has Web 2 become a dystopian nightmare of information bubbles and conspiracy theories and misinformation and tribalism and so on? Well,
I can take a guess.
Yeah.
Because we don't own our information.
Yeah. Well, you don't own anything.
You don't own anything.
You don't own anything. You're being used, right? Value is being extracted out of your brain by centralized systems that only care about increasing engagement and watch time and juicing the bottom line. You don't own anything. And like we've talked about this in a separate episode, right? People like to say that, if something is free, that means you're the product. You wish you were the product. You are not the product. You're the substrate out of which value is extracted, right? You are we're talking about a gold mine the product is gold. You're not gold. You're the mountain. You're the mountain that's getting hollowed out. Okay? You wish you were the product. So this is what's happening on Web 2. And it's, look, I think good things have happened, with the Facebook files coming out. And I think more people are aware of these problems now. But I'm also not sure if this is reversible at this point, right? I don't know if these problems if we can walk back the mistakes we made on Web 2. Well, decentralized ownership of stuff could be a solution to this. And the proposed solution, and this is 6529's idea, not mine. But I do think it's a valid thesis. As he says, look, we have to get people used to owning their stuff in a decentralized, non-custodial way. You're not renting this from Facebook. You own it. It's yours. And Facebook can do fuck all about it. That's the important part, right? And this, by the way, is also the general value proposition of something like Bitcoin. You own your Bitcoin. Your nation's central bank can do nothing about it. Your nation's government can be like, oh, we're banning Bitcoin. You're not allowed to have it anymore or something like that. But then they have to enforce it. How are they going to find out? Because you can own your Bitcoin by remembering 24 words in your brain, right? Governments are pretty bloody far away from being able to detect whether you have memorized 24 words that are associated with a private key, right? So how the hell are they going to enforce it? Basically, no centralized institution, no nation, no government can do anything about it. If I want to own Bitcoin, nobody can intervene, right? And so nobody can come along and say, oh, because you've broken the rules, we're going to take away your Bitcoin. Nobody can say you violated. How often have you seen this kind of thing? Where you load up whatever, you load up the app, you load up the thing, and it pops up. Oh, here's the new terms of service. Scroll through these 15 pages and say yes. And if you say no, you can't use the thing anymore. Oh, you've spent years and years, making art with this Adobe program or something. Well, if you decline our terms of service, that's all over. Oh, you've stored your stuff on Google Drive. If you decline our terms of service, you can't get it anymore, right? This kind of thing cannot happen when you actually own your stuff. So if we get people used to the idea, or used to the practice of owning their stuff, then they will not settle for a metaverse where you don't own your stuff and where someone else can just say, oh, no, because we've changed the rules, so now you can't do this anymore, right? And the idea is that essentially the memes and the things that you own are more important than the network. So if I can own my stuff in whatever this metaverse is, I will be there and I'll interact there. And if I don't like this anymore, I'll take my stuff and go to a different metaverse. That's the key. And that is the thing that every centralized, by the way, after the Facebook Meta announcement, every other tech company in the world is talking about the metaverse now. Microsoft is like, oh, here's our metaverse, which looks equally boring as the Facebook.
Can't it just be one open source place?
No.
Why?
Because then how is Mark Zuckerberg going to get all the money? Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to share with Microsoft and with Tencent and all the other people who've announced their metaverses. No, he wants all of the money and all of the control. And you cannot get, this is, Betamax versus VHS. This is Blu-ray versus HD, DVD, or whatever it was called. You have to win the battle so that you own it all, right? And that is exactly the solution, right? If you basically say, no, the metaverse is wherever I can do my thing and own my stuff, and if I don't like it here anymore, I'm just going to pack up and leave. With my stuff, and nobody can say, because that's exactly one of the things. Look, this is very much a Web 2, software as a service kind of thing. Is like you want to make a high pain of disconnect, right? Oh, you want to stop paying this subscription? Well, you lose all your progress, you lose all your stuff, you lose everything, so that you have to keep paying the subscription. And NFTs are basically the solution to that.
I think there's one struggle with that is basically like the trap of convenience that is already like part of the business model basically of like everything is so simple now, everything gets less friction and so on and so on. And I think that might stand in the way a little bit when like there's one metaverse which is just established where maybe also the company who offers the metaverse has like features in it which are not accessible in another feature because they're, for example, network, like Airbnb wouldn't work with if one of the parties wouldn't have enough like offer or demand, right? So I think it will probably cap the amount of metaverse that can be around, and I think that could be a problem because then you cannot just simply say, okay, I'm going to go away with all my shit, because there's something in there that you need. Maybe like you need a social media presence to basically have something that when people run ads or to be found and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that might still be a challenge, and I think it's surely helpful, right? Because you give at least some power to people, and then when people fuck off, it matters, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think there need to be like I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but like the equivalent of the internet itself as a metaverse, where nobody is basically owning this, but the internet, how it was created was a happy accident. Like, how are we ever going to recreate this?
This is the battle to be fought. This is the battle to be fought. And my answer to some of that would be like decentralize everything. Like your social media followers should be decentralized. Like I bring my followers to your platform if I like your platform. Like, look, realistically, this is basically already how it happens, because this does happen where people say, listen, I'm not using Twitter anymore. I'm going to use Discord now. You follow this link, right? It's just a very inefficient system. But decentralize everything. What if you had a direct relationship to your audience where you just say, like, I want to follow this person, right? And it's not like, you want to change to this new social media platform, well, you have to start from scratch again, Like, I think that there are, again, like this is where we're very, very, very early, and nobody knows how this is going to play out. But this is where all of this, sovereign ownership of things, decentralization and so on, this is where it goes really far beyond just, I own some coins and the value is going up.
That's kind of why I wanted to ask the question, like, look, like going extreme thoughts and thinking of the future. This has the potential and power to disrupt nationalities, doesn't it? Eventually.
Well, I mean, nation states are in meat space, right? And that is a whole different thing. Like where you park your meat suit will still be, that will still be very... I think I don't know what you mean by disrupt nation states, but it's like, yes, it basically it takes away some of the stuff that is now governed by nation states as everything moves into a digital space. And this is again why tech companies are like, we could be the new, we could grab that. The thing that it's in a way, some of this is a zero-sum game, right? So it's like if life and economy and everything becomes digitized, then the centralized company says, we could grab that. We want to grab this land so that the value flows to us.
Yeah.
And what we're basically talking about is, how do we make sure that doesn't happen? And how do we make sure that we have, instead of it just being like this race of the richest, most powerful company becomes even richer and more powerful, how do we change the game so that we have a more distributed value, basically distributed ownership, distributed wealth, and so on, so that if we move, so if you think of it as a gradual move from meat space into meta space, that we, instead of it just being like in meat space, we already have that, right? We have the powerful few with all the money and concentrated ownership and so on. Like, how do we make that gradual transition also a gradual transition to more like shared ownership, and use it as an opportunity to solve some of the problems that I think it's too late to walk back on.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense, because the where that thought even came from was just thinking of using NFTs in, let's say, applications like keeping my ID document.
Yeah.
And documents that, or my birth certificate or that type of thing, where I'm going to use it in a centralized purpose, so that I can, I'll send my ID document to somebody, or my CV, or whatever it is, some document that I can prove this is the original.
Yeah.
Anybody else is a fake. I am me.
I mean, this makes a lot of sense, right? That's one of the things where you can see the methods we use to prove something like identity are extremely archaic.
They're bad.
and yeah, it would make much more sense to have provable ownership, right? So again, you tap your phone, and it basically shows that you are the unique owner of this ID or whatever, right? And you know that, and this is something that blockchain technology enables. You know that this isn't just something that can be copy pasted. It's not like 10 people can walk around with a digital copy of your passport and spoof the system. You know that there can be only one verified real one. And yeah, I think a lot of this kind of stuff, proof of ownership, even proving who owns this car, who owns this house, and so on. It makes perfect sense to bring all of that onto crypto, basically on chain. This stuff needs to be on chain. I mean, because it's just so inefficient to do it off chain, right? And that's a whole separate discussion. I mean, that's also one of the things that I think that's a very strong use case of crypto, and I hope that we're going there. But also, wow, we're so bloody early for this. And I think it's valuable to be aware of this and kind of just keep your finger on the pulse, see how this develops. Because with this, we're so early, I don't even know if there's any opportunity here yet. But probably eventually there'll be some opportunity here for those who are early enough to notice,
Yeah. It's just what that was for me an important and sort of derivative thought of why is an NFT important, that following this whole conversation. It's like, even if you don't believe these radical changes will happen, these are applications that could become quite real.
Totally.
Without life changing too much, just becoming more efficient.
Yeah, it's just more efficient, more convenient. Yeah, for sure.
Which we're pretty good at doing.
Yeah.
Becoming more efficient. And
so I'm curious, is there a way in NFT to basically have like a tier list of basically someone, like, let's say I have a video or a JPEG. It doesn't really matter for the purpose of the argument. And I say there's the original edition, and then there's tier 2 edition, which is a supporter edition, and then there's tier 3, which is a consumer edition. So that I'm saying the consumer is basically like, okay, I'm getting this so that I'm supporting the artist with whatever I can afford. The supporter edition is like, I want to get a limited edition, but it's going to be like worth more. And this way I'm supporting the artist. And the number 1 edition is basically the ultimate
original,
bragging right.
Yeah. That would be possible, yeah. That would be 3 different products, basically. But also something that we're seeing already happen with some projects is that you could have something like... yeah, for sure, right? Let's say you have a video and you can buy it and you get an NFT as a, proof of ownership, essentially. And by the way, one of the things you can do with that, you can also resell it. And this is how you can tell whether you own something or not, right? If you can't resell it, you don't own it, right? So it's like, I can't sell you my favorite song on my Apple Music playlist. I can't sell you that because I don't own it. Still pay for it though, but I don't own it.
Yeah.
And true ownership means I get to sell it if I want to, right? So you could definitely do that. But I think what we are seeing with projects like this is that you can have NFTs that, for the kind of support the project kind of thing, you can have NFTs that go along with it. And it could be something like... it could be something like let's say for a movie, you have 100 exclusive behind the scene photographs, and those can be sold as an NFT, right? Where again, on the one hand, it's a good photograph, like I want to own it, but also like the reason I'm even bidding for it is because like I want to support this project or I want to support this artist. And another thing that we've also seen, we've seen like versions of this, right, with generative art. And this is also this kind of a gamified factor of NFTs, where essentially you mint an NFT, and in the act of minting it, there is some random generation event. And this is how all these avatars like CryptoPunks work. So you essentially have these avatars, and they have dozens of different traits, and these get mixed together at random. And so you end up with, a punk that has short hair and an eye patch and a mustache. These are like the traits that were randomly mixed together, essentially. And that's like a gamified thing, because your act of minting the NFT like creates this unique combination that nobody could have predicted before what it would turn out as, right? And this is also something that, for example, some of these early video game projects are basically work like that, where you say, look, we're going to randomly throw together these avatar traits, and you support the project, you get this unique avatar that you'll then be able to use in the game once the game is done. And that's also a way to, so rather than the game itself being an NFT, you're buying stuff that's associated with the game or part of the game. Mm-hmm. And I do think I think we'll see a lot of experiments like that in the future. A really interesting one is the Loomlock NFT. Again, anyone interested can look that up, where someone launched a physical product that has nothing to do with NFTs, but they financed it by launching an NFT first, right? And so they just made lots of money auctioning off these NFTs, and now they have the money to make the physical product, right?
Just like a funding, crowdfunding.
Yeah. And I think we'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. And the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet, again, beyond all the revolutionary stuff, one of the things that's brilliant about NFTs is built-in royalties. And that's the norm, is that like if I buy, your piece of art, your digital art, okay, I buy it, you get the money I spend on it, right? If I resell it later, you get like 5% of that. And you get 5% or 10% or whatever you've set it as on every single resale of that piece of art. And that's great. And that's really, really great, because it also means that the artist can just do their thing. They make art, they sell it, and they can benefit off of speculator activity. Because if speculators go wild about it and the trades, and you end up with this situation where maybe you're selling a piece of art for $1,000, and a few months later someone resells it for like $1 million. And instead of just being totally sidelined as the artist, you're like, oh, this is great, because you're still getting a cut, right?
Yeah.
Question: theoretically, one could co-own it too. You can turn it into a fraction, can't you?
Yeah, you can fractionalize it. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So you can look at fractional art. I actually don't know what the website is called, but you can look up, if you basically type in, if you search for fractional art, you can see exactly that. So where you can own fractions, of a CryptoPunk, for example. So if you can't afford, if you're like most people, you can't afford an entire CryptoPunk, right? The things are so expensive. But you can own a fraction of a CryptoPunk, just like you can own a fraction of a Bitcoin, basically, right? It's
that's
like
what
that.
just clicked in my head, and I'm like, oh shit! So the royalty aspect for the artist is immense, because there's trading then going on.
I actually don't know how the trading of fractionals affects.
I mean, we might not have it yet, but think about like.
But that's
should be possible that.
Yeah.
So basically, you get like a. I mean, couldn't we come to the point where like the fraction course of an NFT is basically a curve in and of itself? And
it is already. That's already the case.
So.
Yeah, that's already the case.
That's crazy.
Because look, this is one of the ideas, right? It's like you let the market do its thing, right? And that's, like I mentioned before, if you actually own something, you get to sell it, and that automatically creates a market. And this is one of the great things. Look, for the most part, again, people love to talk about scams and all this kind of stuff. I don't think that there's really necessarily more scams in crypto than outside of crypto, there's scams everywhere. What I see is that there are really nice examples of just like pure markets, pure emergent markets. And exactly this kind of thing happens, you know. You have people who buy the art for the art. But you have people who buy the art and fractions of art and all this kind of stuff just because they're speculators. And this creates a market, this creates liquidity. And it's generally good. Like, it's generally a good thing. I don't think this is a bad thing. Because yeah, it's good for the artist if all this activity brings them more income. It simply brings more people in. Even something like fractional art, it just brings more people in. Oh, you can't afford, the whole thing that you want. Well, you can buy a fraction of it, right? You can participate. And the fact that there's a market also means that, yeah, you can, maybe you're spending a lot of money on art because you like it, and maybe it appreciates in value. And the great thing about digital art is what's already happening with art. A lot of art, I remember seeing this in a documentary, like some shocking percentage of art is basically immediately bought and then stored in vaults somewhere because it's bought as a store of value. And of course, if you have it actually displayed somewhere, it deteriorates faster. So you just want to store it in a vault, right? I mean, that's sad, isn't it? Like, art should be seen, no? And so this is also great with digital art. This is also great about right-click saving. If you see an NFT you really like, well, guess what? You can right-click save it and use it as your desktop background. Actually, no one cares. I mean, obviously, the right-click savers think that this is the ultimate dunk on NFT owners, but guess what? Nobody cares. Like, people who buy the art because they like the art, because they want to be the real owner, because they want to support the artist, they don't care if you right-click save their art. If you enjoy the art, do with it what you want. This is a good thing about digital art.
It's like if you have the actual Mona Lisa in your house, you don't care how many fakes are across the world. You just don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Why would it matter? And I can come to you and be like, look, my copy of the Mona Lisa is like a perfect, indistinguishable. Yeah, but it's not the original, so who cares? Anyway, okay.
Cool stuff.
So that's why NFTs will potentially save the world. And again, like, I think you should get involved. With NFTs specifically, I don't know if the answer is that you should buy an NFT, because honestly, I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. I don't know if it's a good idea to get swept up in the speculation around NFTs, but I think you don't want to be the equivalent of the person who says, oh, this newfangled internet thing, I don't think it's ever going to catch on. It's a fad. You don't want to be that guy, basically. Don't be that guy with NFTs. That's all. That's all I would say about it.
Yep, makes sense.
Is there a way for, like, obviously literally anyone can make an account and upload some random fucking JPEG. But how is one creating interest for speculators and or audience? Is that you bring your audience in and they want to support you, almost like a Patreon kind of thing, and that the speculators kind of need to see a future potential for it to go, and how do you do that?
It's just, I mean, I'm obviously not an expert in this, but it's just an open market. So, of course, if you have a large audience of people who want to support you already and you're an artist, then you'll have an easier start. But, it just like pre-NFT, like, forget NFTs. How do you get paid for your art as an artist? Well, you have to get the right people's attention somehow. You probably have to make good enough art, or something about your art has to stand out to people in such a way that they end up wanting to buy it. That's like the minimum, and it helps to know the right people. You probably have to do a bit of networking. Something has to happen to get people to the point where they want to buy your art. That hasn't changed with NFTs. It's still the same. I think it's just what's different is that NFTs are bringing a lot more people into the space. Because, like, look, how many people bought art before? It's some kind of a weird exclusive club. I don't know. I don't think I know anyone. But NFTs are like bringing a lot more people into that space where they're like, oh yeah, I want to own this thing, or I want to support this artist. And it's like, so it's expanding the market, I think. But yeah, apart from that, it's the same, right? You have to make something that people want, and it probably takes a little bit of luck and so on. Same as before.
Yeah. I was going to say that, like I said earlier, with cryptocurrency becoming a more accessible way of trading or understanding that whole world without having to go to the stock market where everything is like, you can't understand that for the for reasons that they don't want you to.
Yeah.
It's like the accessibility into a world where you have the ability to create your own wealth or your own setup, it's just, I think that is the most exciting thing about all of this.
Yeah. No, look, owning assets is super exciting. I think it's very, very sad that how many people basically don't own assets.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things I've been preaching in the wealth course and everything, right? It's like, listen, become an owner of assets. Please, please, please become an owner of assets. Yeah, unless you hate money, right? And learn how to deal with, because an asset comes with responsibilities and it comes with risks. And it means that you're not just being handheld, but I think that is what you ought to do as an adult. You ought to do this kind of thing. And yeah, owning things, actually owning things is exciting. And if it's accessible, a lot more people want to own assets if it's accessible. And a lot more people want to own art if it's accessible. And that's a very, very good thing. Are there any questions that you guys have that we haven't talked about yet?
We've talked briefly about creating a token and a coin to basically create an ecosystem, which is essentially like a small market to finance a product. Generally speaking, what do you think? Is that a valuable approach? In which circumstances does that make sense, if it does make sense at all? And like, what are the challenges and what are the things that are actually easier about it than you would imagine?
Actually, I think an important point about this is, let's establish this. Anyone can create their own token, and you don't need to get permission from anyone to do it. And that's part of this, right? That's part of the deal. It's permissionless. You can launch your own coin. Like, you can try to find a dog name that hasn't been done yet and launch your own dog coin. You can do that. It might be a bit late for that. I don't know what the next thing is, but anyway, you can do that. Okay. And one of the things is like, can you use this? Can you create a token for your project? Can you create, or should you do NFTs for your project? Can you create a token for your community? And the answer is yes, you can. And this is also something like, I want to be an early actual user of this stuff. I would love to create an ikario community token. The reason I haven't done it yet is because I think there's about 1 million ways for it to go wrong, and there's far fewer ways for it to go right. And so you can easily launch a token with the best of intentions, but it ends up being some kind of a rug pull type situation where, maybe there's like a speculative run up and then a huge crash, and then everyone's just like, oh, this is a scam, and you were just like, crap. And then it's kind of over, but also, or it could just never take off, or there's so many things that can go wrong. For a community token to really work, or any kind of token you make to really work, you have to it has to have some kind of a use case, or it has to be attached to a really good meme, or it has to involve good art, or it has to somehow work, right? It has to kind of find integration in the ecosystem somehow. And what I'm waiting for, I think this is viable, right? I think there's many use cases. And I think NFTs probably more so than tokens, so more so than like cryptocurrencies. I think NFTs, there's lots of use cases for that, to use it to, bootstrap projects, support art, stuff like that. I also think that community tokens are potentially big, but I'm still waiting to see good examples of community tokens and to learn lessons from, failed and successful community tokens to figure out how to do this. Because I do think there's a way to do this that would be, that would basically be plus, positive expected value for everyone involved. I think it should be possible to make a community token for something like ikario that that basically makes things better for everyone, that somehow creates a system by which people who are involved in the community get rewarded, right? So basically people who do a lot for the community, or who are just like active participants, or who, I don't know, like people who you want to be rewarded get rewarded thanks to the mechanics of the community token. And it could be good for the company as well, right? Because maybe you could do something like, instead of buying a ticket to the event, that we do, is like you have to own community tokens in order to be, or something like that, right? And I think there's ways in which this could go that would be positive value for the owners of the token and for us. But there's so many ways in which it can go horribly wrong,
Or not at all.
or that it just doesn't work at all. That I'm basically, like I said, I'm waiting to see examples of that. But I think that in the future we will see more of this. I think, there's potential there.
I thought a very interesting, I don't know if we can call it a loop, basically, in this kind of thinking, is that the company which is issuing, or which is somehow attached to the currency because they are producing something, right? Like there's this legal entity which is producing a product, or multiple products. So I'm just taking my example, the example that I brought up. Basically, if you have like an intellectual property which could spawn a bunch of, like, it could manifest in different ways, like movies, games, whatever.
Yeah.
And if there's like a central, there's like a producer, basically, in some form. If this producer can sell this art that is created, they will take a percentage of the profits, which is unchangeably like registered, and burn parts of the tokens that they buy it and then burn it, which will increase the value of the token, because the token becomes more and more rare, and that would basically increase, like it would basically automatically increase the value of the token once the company makes any sort of profit, and therefore it's like a win-win. Like everyone who's in is interested in.
If that, I mean, this is one of the ways in which that could be interesting, right? It's kind of like a stock buyback a little bit, right? Where you basically say, look, we will use our future profits to reduce the supply of the token, which means that it basically drives demand, which means that token holders get rewarded, right? That's one of the mechanisms by which this could work, and I think that could be very interesting. But even the idea that, again, like, I hope we'll see this, and I hope it won't take too long. But it's like right now we're so early to this. But even what you mentioned with intellectual property, I think this could be so interesting. Imagine you could flip this whole copyright problem on its head, basically. Instead of having, Nintendo go brutally after everyone who's ever shown a 2-second clip of a Nintendo game. Like, what if you had, something like, the Star Wars universe, and like anyone can do stuff in this, with this intellectual property, and there's some mechanism by which the profits generated flow back to the owner, right? So in this case, to Lucas's whatever, George Lucas, I guess. His company or whatever, right? Whoever gets all the money, I don't know.
Disney.
So, because then it'd be like the opposite. Instead of everyone trying to clamp down and, oh my God, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to use this music. You're not allowed to. It would be like, no, make things, and if they're good, then I get rewarded. That's great.
Yeah, I talked to Dean about that, and there might be like a version which might not necessarily be dependent on like the crypto space developing, but like simply on just like changing the attitude of an IP owner. Yeah, like if I aim to create like instead of just having my IP and guarding it, I'm trying to like create a curated open source IP, where basically I encourage everyone to do their stuff. I maybe even give out like small funds for people who are doing fan films and stuff like that. Yeah. And then I reward products which are created in the community, which are of outstanding quality and fit the lore, with basically elevating them from legends to canon. And this whole thing would at least, like, I don't know how it would work. It would be a soft incentive, not a hard incentive, but it might like elevate the space, just because if more people are creating and are more encouraged to create, they are going to create more in the it's gonna be more relevant of an IP.
Yeah, I think that sounds nice, but I think the on-chain decentralized version of it is bolder, because instead of having a centralized entity that decides, okay, this work is good enough and it'll get elevated, it's just like, no, the community decides, and this is what a decentralized economy can establish. It's just like, no, it's up to everyone. It's essentially general consensus. Is this work good enough? And if it is, then it gets, more of the incentive flows to it, simply because more people view it or something like that. And that creates a flow back to the IP owner automatically. And ideally, the IP owner is, and it would have to be in this scenario, is everyone. It is everyone who owns the token. There's no special privilege. There's no company that, gets more of the benefit. If you want to get the benefit, you hold the token.
Yeah, and obviously the IP creator would benefit because they're early adopters and therefore
they have a lot of the token. Yeah.
Yeah, right. The only thing that I would say is might be a little bit specific to IPs, which might stand in the way of that, is that that I think there's a certain amount of like craving to basically when you want to escape in like a different world, that you basically want this world to be logically consistent. And then when people come and create something which is like, I think we've seen that with like the League of Legends universe, where it's like all the skins and stuff are being integrated in the thing, and then there's like champions like Seraphine or Release, where they're like clearly they don't have any place in Runeterra, but they're still a champion, and then you get this huge backlash. You could say, okay, maybe that would curate itself because there was a backlash and people don't like it, right?
Basically, yeah.
But
I think it would curate itself, and also the future is going to be weird. The future is going to be weirder than the present. And I think, like, I understand an artist wanting to like tightly control the thing, but this is just a different proposition. That you do have to let something like that run wild, and you have to trust. It's a different proposition. You have to trust that, the community will do their thing.
Cool. Different topic. Question. So you said it's a pretty good time to get like quite bullish and aggressive in the crypto market, especially if you're new, get yourself going and get up. Right now, in the specific November, December, end of year, it's like we're all expecting this like massive spike for the cycle. How should a newbie be looking at this in terms of their like strategy now?
Yeah.
Is it something that you just buy and wait, or should you be trying to like sell some, or thoughts on like how to handle strategy now if you're new to the game and you're only holding little?
Yeah. So if you're getting in now, then you're not early to this cycle, okay? And yes, a lot of people are expecting a run up anytime between like now and, I don't know, let's say May next year or so, expecting some kind of a spike in price, right? And if the cycle repeats, we would expect a really surprising spike in price followed by a very, very painful crash in price. So here's, and obviously, but let me first say, nobody knows if this is going to happen, okay? Nobody knows if this is going to happen. Maybe the price goes sideways for God knows how long. Maybe it all bleeds out from here. Who knows? Nobody knows. But you can basically place your bets, right? You can place your bets like, is the cycle going to play out? Now, if you're only just joining now, the first thing I would say is, listen, you're not going to get rich this cycle. You're not going to get rich this cycle. The more you try to get rich this cycle, the more likely you are to lose. Because it won't take, like someone jumping in right now, they hear about Bitcoin, they hear about Ethereum and so on. It won't take them long to figure out that if they put all the money available to them into Bitcoin, if it doubles, that's pretty good. That's about as much as you can expect, you know? And of course, unless you're already very wealthy, doubling your money is nice, but it's not going to let you retire, right? So And so then you go and look for, well, what's the other play? And then you're like, yeah, you have Cardano and XRP, and then maybe you figure out, okay, these are actually also really high up in the list already. You know, they're already huge market caps. Maybe these aren't going to go 100x either. And so then you go down and you go into the doggy coins and all this other stuff, and various Ponzi's and so on, right? There's a lot of stuff waiting for you if you're trying to get rich this cycle. And most of this stuff is going to make you poor this cycle. And your chances of being able to pick the thing that'll go 100x between now and next year, and I'm sure it's out there, you know, something will do that. Your chances of picking that are so low, you might as well buy a lottery ticket. So that's the first thing I would say. Listen, you're not going to get rich this cycle unless you're already rich. So what do we do with that? There's basically two approaches. Or no, actually, the most important thing is, the most valuable thing you can do is you can learn. You can learn. And this is actually another mistake I made, right? I've talked about this in the wealth course, for example, as well, where, look, last cycle, I was relatively late entering. So, you know, I entered a few months before the big run-up. And at the time, the conclusion I came to is, okay, the price is going to go up a lot and it's going to go down a lot. And I don't have enough knowledge or skill or anything to determine when which is going to happen. And so what I'm just going to buy and hold. That was my plan. I'm just going to buy and hold. And that's what I did. And it did work out, right? I'm up like hundreds of % on my Bitcoin and Ethereum purchases from then. But I did sit through like a minus 80% or minus, I don't know, my overall portfolio went down by something like 70%, right? So, and I just sat through that for several years. But the plan worked. And so the thing I did right is I made a plan and I just stuck with it. The mistake would be to go, oh my God, the price has gone down even further, and then capitulate, right? And you sell, and then the price runs up again. That's terrible. So at least what I did is I made a plan and I stuck with it. Was it the best plan for maximizing profits? No. I sat through a massive drawdown, right? But if you stick with the plan, it ends up working. And so that's one of the things you can do, is you can basically just say, well, I'm just going to start buying this, right? Maybe buy $50 worth of Bitcoin every month. And I'm just going to keep doing that no matter what the price does. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And this is, again, I'm going to be rich in like if you do $50 a month, it's going to take a while. But, you know, however much you do every month, right? That's going to make you rich in like 10 years. And if you stick to that plan, I think the chances of that working out are incredibly good. So that's one approach. But one mistake I made in my first cycle is that I thought I was too late, essentially. I thought I was too late to like really get into this and you know, maybe learn trading and so on. I was like, it's too late. Everybody else is before me. But it's like, of course, the moment I enter the market, I am the greenest participant. And so everyone seems to be early compared to me. What I realize now is that there are a lot of people who got in at the same time as me, or even later than me, who've become like super accomplished traders and investors and whatnot. I'm like, oh shit, I wasn't late. So that's a mistake I made, because that is, I think, a viable plan. You can say, okay, the best thing I can do here is I can learn. And I can, especially if it really grabs your interest, you can be like, I can actually start building something in this space. And that could be, maybe you build a decentralized finance application or something like that. You build software. But it could also be you build a network. You start making content. You start, you know, going to conferences, and maybe you start specializing. Maybe you're like, okay, NFTs are my thing, you know, gaming NFTs. I want to really learn about gaming NFTs. I want to know all the businesses who are building stuff here. I want to talk to these people, so that over the next years, I can spot early opportunities and I can be an early investor in something that's going to blow up. Again, this is going to make you rich in like 5 to 10 to 15 years. But you can use this opportunity to like get in now and start getting to know people, start making content, start building software, start building your network, whatever it is you do, you can start getting in now, and that will pay off over time, right? And it's the same with, maybe you want to learn how to be a really effective investor in this, or maybe you want to learn how to trade. And learning how to trade is super, super difficult, right? Most people will fail at this, but that's no reason not to do it. It's just like entrepreneurship is difficult and most people fail. There's no reason not to do it. If that's something you want to do, basically don't make the mistake of thinking you're too late. See this as, again, you're not going to get rich this cycle, but you can start learning now, and you're probably going to experience a crash, and you're probably going to experience a prolonged bear market. And if you learn all the way through that, you're going to be incredibly well positioned for the next speculative run-up, if it happens.
Yeah.
Which we don't know. But I think the most important thing is use the opportunity to learn, use the opportunity to start playing. Make sure you actually learn from your mistakes and your wins, and create a plan and stick with it. I think the opportunity to get rich within a decade has rarely been better than now. Don't squander that opportunity because you want to get rich in the next quarter.
Yep, sounds like good advice, because that's been the back and forth, and I feel like I've done a good job of experimenting. So for example, I did a single day of trading on the cycle. So just for one day, I sold some and bought some and sold on the little mini ups and downs. And it was like, okay, I get it. That was fun. I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
What that taught me was, don't try and play this cycle either. I could, and how I would have to do that would be based on a fixed number. So yeah. Regardless of what happens after that point, I'm selling when Bitcoin reaches 75 or reaches 80 or reaches 90. I'm going to sell half of it, put that into my personal runway where I've borrowed this from technically, and then leave it there, and then keep playing my $50 a month until I can make that $100 a month, until I can make that more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually, so that's a good point. One of the things is that if you put in money, and especially this applies more to people who put in money earlier, if you're looking at life-changing money, take profit. Yeah. All right. This is very important because the reason, why don't you take profit? Maybe you've put in $2,000 and now it's $50,000. And you're like, well, but if I keep this, maybe it's going to turn into $1 million, right? And so you don't take profit. But I think it's very important to realize the difference in utility between now and later. Look, in some cases, again, if you're looking at that and going, look, I don't know how to time this market. I think it's going to turn into $1 million at some point, so I'm just going to basically ignore what the price does until then. If you stick to that, that's fine. But if you have like some huge debt that you're paying lots of interest on, and especially if you could sell like 50%, 70% of your position and get rid of that debt, the actual impact that it has on your life quality right now is greater than the impact in the future, where you're like, oh, if I hadn't sold back then, I would have $2 million now, and now I only have $1 million. Actually, it doesn't matter that much. Yeah. And so, like, if your overall thesis, right, if you're right about crypto, if you're taking a bet on crypto in general, if your overall thesis about crypto is right, and this is the future of everything, and it will appreciate like crazy, it doesn't matter that much. If you've missed out in the future, if you have millions, it doesn't matter that much if you're selling now has cost you $1 million or so in opportunity. Paying off that debt now can make a much bigger difference to your life quality than having an extra $1 million 10 years from now, right? Yeah. And it's the same thing. Look, these opportunities are not going to go away. Like, this is also a fear-based mindset, right? Where you're like, oh my God, I can't sell because what if I make a mistake? What if it goes up after I sell? Well, first of all, it's going to go up after you sell. Like, what, are you going to sell the absolute top? How likely is that? It's going to happen is you're going to sell and you're going to see the price go up. Yeah, fine. Yeah. But like, the opportunities are always, this is not going to suddenly go away, right? Like, there are going to be first of all, even just in crypto, It's likely that there will be some kind of a cycle. It's likely that there will be another run up a few years from now. And being positioned for that is more valuable than anything you can do right now. Again, unless you already have a lot of money in, right? For most people, the most valuable thing you can do is be positioned well for the next one. And that basically means know more and be earlier next time. But even if that's not the case, more crypto projects are constantly happening, right? Even just in the last 2 years, we've had the emergence of decentralized finance. Lots of amazing wealth generating opportunities there. We've had the emergence of this NFT, the expensive JPEG stuff. Loads of opportunity there. We have the emergence of like this NFT pay to earn gaming stuff. Loads of opportunity there. Do you think that's going to stop now? Mm-hmm. No. The next thing is coming. It's going to keep happening. And even if you think all this crypto stuff is nonsense, it's going to go to zero, this is true of the world overall. New opportunities are constantly arising. And so build your skills and your knowledge in such a way that you can take advantage of future opportunities. So that's how I look at it, right? And that's why I'm basically saying, yes, again, like take profit if you see life-changing money. If you assume that this cycle is going to play out, then maybe set a number like you said. You say, okay, if it goes to 100K, I'm going to start selling or something like that. All of that is reasonable, right? But I can't tell you what to do because I don't know. But I think it's a good idea to make a plan and stick with it and see what happens. And if it turns out to have been a mistake, learn from those mistakes, because the key thing is upgrade your skill set and upgrade your knowledge so that you can take advantage of opportunities in the future. This is what it all comes down to. And this is why it's not about finding the token to buy right now to get rich as quickly as possible. Like, this works out for almost no one. Become the kind of person who knows the kinds of things and is good at the kind of things that makes you rich in the future. That is a feasible game plan for so many people.
Gotcha.